Welcome to the Grow Your Practice podcast. Hi, I'm your host, Chad Madden, owner of Madden Physical Therapy and Breakthrough. Join me each week as we dive into the best practices, systems, principles, tips, and tricks to help you grow your private practice.
Hey everybody, Chad Madden here with the Grow Your Practice podcast. And today we have a repeat visitor. We're going to get an excellent status update from Deepak. Deepak is the owner of Primus Physiotherapy in Alberta in Canada, Edmonton, correct?
That's right.
Yep. And one of the unique things about Deepak is hopefully you heard the episode in January of 2021 when he was on this podcast last, but came from a very humble beginnings, shared his story about he opened a practice, and he has one of the unique attributes of actually joining Breakthrough before he even opened his practice. So amazing student, even better implementer, building quite a practice in Alberta, Canada. And welcome back, Deepak.
Thank you very much.
Great. So if you could give us a bit of bring us up to speed. So 18 months ago, when you had flown here from Canada, the one thing that had happened is on your way back, you had to be quarantined for 15 days or so. And
That's right.
you were forced out of the clinic. So can you talk about what happened, like what you discovered? And because I believe at that time you were treating quite a bit, and then all of a sudden you were forced not to treat at all. So can you talk about that experience and what you learned from that?
Sure. So back in 2021, when I visited you, so the COVID rules were changing every now and then. So when I booked the flight to come and visit you, there was like no quarantine phase at all coming back to Canada. But the day I landed, I reached home and I got a text from the government saying that, okay, now you have to quarantine for 14 days. And it actually came like a blessing in disguise kind of a thing. So till then I was like treating almost 70, 80 hours a week patients. And that's just clinical hours. And then you add up your charting hours and the management time and stuff. So it was like out of 168 hours in a week, I was like, I'm pretty sure I was somewhere around 110 hours, including everything. So as I said, it came as a blessing in disguise. When I was away at quarantining at home, I told all my staff members, called my clinic, told the office manager that, hey, I won't be able to see any patients. Can you please schedule them with other therapists? And we had some pushback a little bit from some of the patients, but I just told them, hey, I'm here at home. I can't really do anything. Why don't you do one thing? Just any patient who even show you a bit of a resistance, this is my cell number, give them my cell number, or you give me the patient's number and name and I'll talk to them. So for those 14 days, that's what I did. So every time there was a patient who was showing some resistance to the staff member, they would just text me the number and the name, and it's okay, this patient is not willing to change the therapist, not willing to see anybody. So what I would do is I'll call them and I'll be like, hey, all the staff members, they are very well trained and they're probably better than me. I mentor them all the style of treatment that we follow. There won't be any different than what I do. And I assure you that the standard of care you used to get from me would be exactly the same. So that happened. And so most of the patients were scheduled in other therapist caseloads. And then, I went from treating 70, 80 hours a week to 2 days a week. And literally like 16 hours a week. And it was like a big shock for me when I came back to the clinic, because now you have so much of empty time and you just don't know what to do, because you need to plan things out. But then kind of I talked to you a couple of times where, how to manage the time efficiently and all of that. Got a little lazy bum too in between where, I would just sleep in at home because I don't have a patient today booked. So I just slept in. But again, one good learning from that was you got to show up. even though you don't have a patient to treat, you get up and go and show up every single day, because there's a lot of things. So it took me a month or so to adjust everything. But after that, I worked on my meeting schedules, and everything. And now at a point, so long story short, after almost a year and a half now, I don't treat patients in the clinic. I may have the only patient I treat is vestibular and concussion, which is 2 or 3 patients in a whole week. And a lot of time goes into strategic plannings and meetings and all of that, and just optimizing the operations of the clinic and marketing and all of those things.
That's great. I love your personal touch with the cell phone. Guilty of doing the same thing in the past. Just as a rough estimate, how many patients showed resistance when you first did that? So how many personal conversations did you have? And then how many did not convert out of those patients?
So to be honest, I did not. I know one patient out of my whole big client list. There was just one occupational therapist, actually. She was an old patient of mine, and she was just so adamant about not seeing anybody else and just me. And I just told them, hey, this is my time. I was at this time, and you got to make it work otherwise. So I kind of, after having that conversation back in, Harrisburg with you, that you have to draw some lines, and if you want to grow. So I just kind of draw some lines that, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how much time I'm going to devote to clinicals and stuff. So I think I only had one patient that I remember top of my head who was really adamant, and she left the clinic and she went somewhere else. And we are still in contact, and she's like, hey, she would just keep seeking my opinions, but she would not come to the clinic to take treatment from other therapists. She apparently found another manual therapist, and she's been. But top of my head, I remember around 25 to 30% of my caseload were people who were giving some resistance to my front team, and they would just simply text me. And so in a day, I may have 8 or 10 patients to call. But I felt like that was the best thing we did, that I personally called them and I explained them that, hey, why they need to see other therapists. And if I'm assuring them that, hey, I make sure that your standard of care would still be the same, because I'm a clinic director and I still supervise the treatment planning. If there is, just give them 2 weeks. If you don't find them good, I'll come and treat you myself. But giving them just that reassurance, I think that worked pretty well for us. And another thing I think I shared with you too back then, that we did not see a drop in the revenue at all. Like, it was maybe, I think the first month when I stopped treating patients, it was like a $5,000 dip. But then since then, it's a consistent growth that we plan.
That's great.
Yeah.
If you can think back, and this is tough to do, but I know you had efforts to minimize your caseload in the past because you have 4 or 5 other physios.
Five other therapists.
Yep. So I know you had tried to do that in the past. For owners that are thinking about doing that, or maybe they've tried and failed, what words of advice could you give them to help them overcome that and actually make the jump, other than flying to Harrisburg while the Canadian laws change on COVID, where you're forced to do it? What other advice could you give them to change their thought pattern and behavior?
I think one thing I would say is, you get to decide. I think one thing that I had it in my mind that I'm the best therapist, and everybody just it's just a self-limiting belief, nobody can do as good of a job as I'm doing. So there was, I think it was a self-limiting belief on my part that everybody just wants to see me, and I can't send them to my other therapist and they won't do as good of a job as I'm doing. So I think that changing that mindset is kind of really important. You need to learn to delegate the stuff. You need to basically trust other people, and that's sharing that caseload. You should be willing to change things. I think that's one thing I remember worked pretty well for me. That, okay, after talking to you, coming to Harrisburg, and I remember that, in Harrisburg too, we were having this session at your house, and I think you asked me something, and I said that you bring 3 therapists all over Canada, and I can bet you like I'll be the top 3.
I remember you saying that. I remember that exactly. Yeah.
Right. And I think I remember you mentioned that. I think that's where the problem is. Like, you have this mindset that nobody's better than you. Yeah. And I think changing that thought process helped significantly, where I started trusting my therapist more, and yeah, so I think that helped significantly. So that's one part of it. The second thing we did was, so I'm really little strict with how, because we have a very small plan of care and we don't get as many sessions with the patients. So one thing that we started doing was, whenever we send a new patient to the other clinicians in the clinic, so every new clinician gets 2 sessions with the patient. Within 2 sessions, they need to show anywhere from 10 to 30% change in patient's condition. So we went really strict on that. That within 2 sessions, if you don't see the change, whether it's in pain, range of motion, flexibility or whatever, or at times the strength too. If you don't see a change anywhere from 10 to 30% in patient's condition, come and talk to me. And let's sit down and discuss the patient's further plan of care. So that's second thing that helped quite a bit. And then the patient would still see me in the clinic, and they would still see the therapist is trying to engage with me and trying to work on a treatment planning. So I think it took us some time, like 3-4 months, to streamline all of that. But eventually, after 1 year, it was all streamlined.
That's great. Love that advice. Really like what you said about trust in there as well. That's trusting other people is key. Cool. So talk about patient resistance, 2 days a week, empty time. I want to dive into that.
Sure.
So, and helping owners not sleep in or watch cartoons with their son. Your son is school age now, correct?
Next year, he's 4 now.
Oh, okay. I was thinking he was slightly older than Addie.
So they're a few days older. I think he's January born too, and
4 weeks. Yep. Okay. I was thinking it was 4 or 5 months, and that he might be a year ahead in school. Okay. So it's very tempting in the beginning when you have that empty time to fill it in and not to be disciplined with it. Can you talk about that? Because the other thing that you had mentioned that I'd love for you to expand on is showing up every day. And right. I know, my wife during the early days of COVID, eventually she just threw me out of the house, and she said, you need to go to work, just be in an office, work from there. You need quiet time to think and do everything else, but please go there and handle it. And it was a great call on her part. So can you talk about the empty time, how you got more discipline with that, and what you've learned in that process?
Sure. So even with me, I think it was exactly the same thing. Because I was spending too much time at home. My wife didn't like it. And the same conversation we had, and she's like, no, you need to go. I like you being home, but not this much. So you need to go to work and show up. And so I think the first month was a bit of an adjustment for me, because you just don't know what to do with this time that you have in your hand. But then I started planning things. I think one thing we did was I started blocking off, putting the in my calendar. Okay, we started doing the regular meetings. So before that, I was only doing the staff meetings once a week, and because I did not have time to look into other things, I would still look into the management side of the things a little bit, but it gave me a time to be very disciplined with it. So I started writing things down, and I started planning the calendar a day before. So every Monday, I will have individual staff meetings, or with therapists. It'll be a quick, 30-minute check-ins. So even till date, we do that. So with every clinician that we have in the clinic is a 30-minute meeting. Then I do a 30-minute weekly meeting with my the in-house marketer that we have. And then our front team lead, we do that. So I think I started doing that, and I think that kind of helped quite a bit. planning all of those things out, I started because after that I started thinking about, okay, now I've got this time in my hand. Now what's the next step? Like, what do I need to do? And I think me and you had a discussion back then that, okay, now it's the time to bring in the clinician and train them as a clinic director. We started working on that slowly. So those things started taking some time out, but I think the only thing that helped there is being disciplined. So you can't say, like, okay, I've booked this meeting, and then you can't just from home decide, okay, I'm not going to go to the clinic today, and just call the clinic, hey, can you cancel that meeting? Let's do it tomorrow or next day. I think those are the bad habits. I think that you over the time they brew up and spoil the whole culture of the clinic too. So I think being disciplined was best thing that worked. Another thing was I was having hard time doing some deep work that I think, again, we had this conversation about it, and that I would be doing something and then somebody would just open the door and not come in right away. And it would just distract it, because there were days literally where I would come to the clinic for 8 hours, but then I just would feel like I didn't get anything done, because every time I start to do things, somebody would just come in and call me and get distracted. So now when I'm at my deep work, there's a do not disturb sign outside. They know, like, once or twice I had to tell them, like, once it happened that they opened the door even after that sign was there and they walked in. And so I had a conversation about that. And then now I think we're at a position where I think that's been working. When they see the do not disturb sign, nobody walks in and they know that I'm doing some deep work. Yeah.
That's great.
And that answered the question, I guess.
Yeah. You nailed it. It was basically how to fill in that vacuum of time that all of a sudden you have. And the main takeaways that I heard you talk about were discipline. And also, it sounds like you started setting up meetings, not just the weekly meeting with your entire staff, but then you set up a weekly meeting with each individual direct report. So your physios, the clinical director, et cetera. So you could start billing marketing directors, so you could start bringing them along as well.
That's right. Yeah. Another thing, like, I think, again, that came from that, because for me, I think that visit that I made you, and not just I'm saying that everybody should fly and meet you there, but I think there were a lot of things that I learned from there. Like, I remember one of the conversations we were having was about, like, what are the three main pillars of their practice? Whether, like, it was your operations and your personnel and then your marketing side of the things. So I think I started dividing my time that I had in my hand based on those things, that, okay, these are the things what I personally need to do, whether it's operations, how can I optimize these operations? So I wrote a few things down, started putting them into the calendar, and book them with a meeting. Whether it is the marketing, that, okay, I need to go meet the health and safety officer of this company, start planning based on that. And then the personal thing, that, okay, I need to be in touch with the university, I need to be in touch with this group, because that's where we can get the therapist and all of that. So that's, I think, one thing I remember that I did, that I wrote those things down and then divided them into how I can put them into my schedules.
Yeah, great. So I want to share a thought with you, which is a learning that I had very early on when I started working with a business coach. And off and on, I've had a ton of different business coaches over the years. But I remember this is maybe like 2005, 2006, and I was trying to help another clinician friend who owned a business. And I said, this is and I was talking with my coach, and I said, this is very frustrating. I am giving them the exact, like a small snippet of the exact information that I learned from you, and they can't execute. And that is very problematic. And she said, well, how are you meeting with them? And I said, we meet over lunch. It was at El Rodeo, a Mexican restaurant that was right across the street. And this clinician had an office pretty close to mine. And anyhow, we would meet there maybe once a month, and we would talk about ideas. And I just noticed that it didn't matter what I said. He was just never going to execute and implement. And she said, well, think about your level of commitment. He's meeting you for lunch. That is a very low level of commitment. You're probably alternating, like one time you treat, one time he treats, and that's exactly what we were doing.
Right.
And she said, you got on a plane, flew across the country. Like, you're totally committed. You were willing to invest significantly more in yourself. He is not. How can you expect him to have the same results, regardless of whether it's the same information or not? She said, your level of commitment is through the roof. You're going to do better. His level of commitment is very scarce and minimal. And I was like, wow, that's really, really good. So think about what Harrisburg is not fun to fly into, right? You did it in January. You did it during the pandemic. Absolutely amazing. So it's really a testament to you and your grittiness to overcome obstacles and barriers and implement. So well done.
Thank you.
And if you want to know why Deepak is so gritty, go back and listen to the last episode that we recorded when you were here. You talked about the health and safety officer, and also beforehand we were chatting, and you said you had an initiative that you just got back into the office from with Costco. Can you talk about what you're thinking about there, tie that into any deep work you're doing as well, how you're thinking about promoting Primus within your community?
Sure, sir. So again, I'll just give you a little bit of kind of background on it first. That I think one thing that happened over the time is, like, since we opened the clinic till today has been 4 years. Again, initial
today.
So that's few. No, not today, sir. Yeah, but just
close.
Last month. Last month was 4 years anniversary.
Happy birthday.
So yes, thank you very much. So the pattern that we were seeing was that we had a lot of space to grow, bring in a lot of patients and all of that. But once you achieve that steep growth, I think you hit a point where you don't need any more steepness in the growth, but what you need is it's a consistent growth. So I think what we saw that, okay, we are at a point where in 2.5 years, we outgrew the space that we had. We outgrew the staff members that we have and everything. So then we decided, okay, how do we consistently manage it? And one thing we came into my mind was that, okay, sure, we can keep spending the money on the marketing and keep getting the new patients, or we can figure out some of the ways where we reach out in the community, establish our name and brand in the community, and set up some of these relationships with some of the factories and companies in or corporate sectors around us, and have them and start some of the systems so that we can consistently keep getting new patients from them. Because it's a no effort, it's a one-time effort work where you are basically spending 2 or 3 months in setting up that relationship, and then setting up all of that contract and stuff like that. But once it's done, you just have to keep doing a good job as a clinician. That's all. And then they will keep feeding you. So we kind of, me and my marketer, we sat down and we had a meeting, and we said, okay, we need to look for a couple of things. One, who has more than 100 employees around surrounding us, like maybe look for a 5 to 10 kilometer radius. Anybody who has more than 100 employees, or anybody who caters to a large population, and they gather their email. I think that goes back to your all the breakthrough teachings, the cause workshops that we talk about, right? The captive audience workshops. So that's what we started doing. We reached out to, I think, around 60 some companies, and out of those 60, only 10 responded, and 5 actually took it to the next level. So we started working with them. So we're working with 2 companies right now, 2 factories they're huge factories. They have over 500 employee base and all. So we developed that relationship. We set up with them something what we call early intervention program, where every time there is somebody gets injured, they would send the patient straight to us, and we assured them, okay, we'll give a appointment to that patient within 48 hours in our clinic. So now we have this consistent flow of patients coming in through that without much spending in the marketing side of the things. That improves your profit margins, EBITDA levels, and stuff like that. Second thing we did was, again, comes back to the breakthrough teachings that ask your patients where they work and all of that. So we had this one patient. She's an old patient of mine. I've been treating for years. She works at Costco, and so we tried it once before and we got shut down. Like, nobody responded back. But we asked her, hey, you had such a good experience, and is it possible at all to kind of do something with your the other employees who work at a particular Costco store? So she actually made an introduction with a health and safety officer at Costco, and they say once a year they host this health and safety week, and so she made an introduction. So our marketer, Jacob, he kind of collaborated all of that. And so they said, okay, sure. So we had 3 or 4 patients from that particular Costco store. So they said, these are the busiest times. This is a health and safety week. So I want you to come and come in our rest area or the breakout room. And at any given point, they can have 50 employees in there. So they had some guidelines which are pretty standardized across the globe for Costco. They said you cannot treat anybody there and touch anybody, and you cannot sell anything, or you cannot make a transaction in Costco. They said, but apart from that, do whatever you need to do. So they gave us 1.5 hours in the morning, 1.5 hours in the evening for 2 days. So we got 6 hours time, and so today was the first day of that, and tomorrow is the second day. So we are, so that's what we're doing. We're going there, rolling up our banners, educating them, having a quick consults with the patients, and trying to just get the clients. The idea is to basically set up a system where you can improve your profit margins, because, again, I remember from the conversation in the back where you mentioned that, on an average, physical therapy practice in North America works on an 8% profit margin, right? So that was the idea that, okay, luckily we are sitting at 20%. But if there is something that we can do more to improve that EBITDA margins, that was the idea. Minimize the marketing expense and set up this system where we constantly getting feeded by these 2 or 3 institutions surrounding you, creates a goodwill, creates a good community presence, and less marketing expense.
Great. Want to ask you about a couple things. The first one is, I think we were talking about the Peter Drucker principle, the quantity, which is what you talked about in the beginning,
right?
Like filling up the schedules, filling up the space, and you were able to do that in about 2.5 years. And then you're talking about quality, and viability, which you're getting to the profit margin. And if you can go from, let's say, 8 or 10% profitability, which is skating on very thin ice for a service-based business, and we can increase that to 15 or 20%, we're much more viable and more likely to be open next year to be able to continue to serve.
Right.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I had that conversation right. And the other one is, I hear you talking about marketing expense, and the average clinician, when they hear that, the right answer is 0, right? You are investing in marketing.
Yes,
and if you could talk through how you're thinking about that, that would be excellent. Yeah. So
sure.
What are your thoughts on marketing expense?
So for me, I think marketing can be an investment and or an expense for you, depending on how you see it or how you implement it, right? A lot of people, what they think is marketing is you just dump the money and without thinking about your market media message triangle, or just give the money to somebody and they would do the job for you and you don't have to do anything. For me, I think one thing that I've learned over the last 4 years is that marketing sure works, but it doesn't work if you don't do the job. Like, you get to do a lot of background work for it. Like, sure, you can run the ads on Google, or you can run the workshops, or you can do everything. But if you don't train or keep your staff accountable of their part of the work that they need to do, running you can get 100 registrations for the workshop, but if they're not able to convert all of that and bring them into the clinic, then it's just a waste effort. So then that marketing becomes an expense for you and not an investment. So that's how I think about it. And that's why I think I emphasize a lot on implementation side of the things, that or doing things in a right way and get the most out of every single money that I'm putting into the marketing. So that's one part of it, sir. And the second thing is just, I guess, I think for the marketing side of the things, we take out, not necessarily, I think ideally everybody should take out 10%. That's I think that's what I've heard from a lot of people, from you and other people, that okay, take out 10% of your revenue and put it in the marketing. Um, for us, with the rents and everything that we deal with, for me, I'm spending a lot of money in the marketing, but that's still probably not 10% because we can't afford to. Simple logic. But that's when you have to come up with these different solutions of what you can do to still market, because market doesn't, again, one of the things for me is like marketing doesn't have to just involve money. It can be involving your time, effort. It can be involving your other stuff, brewing those relationships that you have in the community and all of that, right? So that's the second part of the things. I think those are the two best answers I can give.
Yeah, and just for context for everybody, average plan of care in Canada for you
is $400.
$400, and square footage, what?
Including the operating cost at $60 a square.
Okay, so and operating cost is utilities, so money to keep the lights on.
Not the utilities. So as the base rent plus your common area cost is what you call operating cost.
Yeah, so $60 a square foot plus. Yeah, so low plan of care. And for all of us that have excuses or are feeling victimized because we operate in the wrong state within the US, I'm pretty sure most of us are more than a $400 plan of care on average and are paying less than $60 a square foot. So you're doing exactly what it takes to survive in what seems like an impossible environment for many owners. Well done.
Thank you.
Hi, listeners. I think I might have something that you're interested in. If you are a listener of this podcast, I'm assuming that you're an owner or an aspiring practice owner. And my question for you is, what's the most pressing thing that you're wondering about in growing your practice? So essentially, if you could ask me any question, what would that be? Is it something around personnel, like, how do I handle when team members ask for a raise? Is it something around marketing? Like, should I be advertising on TikTok, or how often should I be emailing my past patients? Is it something in finance or practice growth? Well, if you have a question, wouldn't it be great if you could get an immediate answer from me to your question? And I think I have something that you might be interested in. If that does fit the case for you, I might be able to help you out. I'm hosting a live Q&A session for private practice owners, and you'll be able to hop on the call and unmute yourself, have your camera on if you prefer, and ask me any question that you might have related to practice growth. Absolutely nothing is out of bounds. And the deal is you just need to register for the call. I think we have a limitation on how many people can get in. This is something new that we're launching specifically to the Grow Your Practice podcast, but you do need to register. So there's likely a link here or in the getbreakthrough.com page. So you can go there or look in the show notes here for the link, but you do need to register for the next live Q&A session. So what's your most pressing question? You make sure that you write that down. What's stopping you from growing your practice in the way that you want to grow it? And then join me in the next live Q&A session, and we'll make sure that you get your questions answered. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was a few months ago when we spoke, and I think we were in Denver together, you were working on the business primarily, and you were trying to tweak some things. Can you talk about, is there any major learning that you had in there, another realization, something you were struggling with, and how did you think through that and overcome it?
Sure, sir. Yeah. So one of the things that happened with in the last 1 year was, so Alberta is primarily an oil and gas country, right? That's all happens. Alberta economy feeds the whole country. The only thing you get here is oil and gas. So when the oil prices started going up, So we pay, I don't know, I can tell you in liters and then we can convert it in gallons, but we pay like 70 cents a liter. We are so used to paying anywhere from 70 cents a liter to 95 cents a liter gas. But what happened last February, February of this year, when Russia attacked Ukraine, and that the gas prices went off the roof, and so the gas pricing now, they are anywhere from like 135, and at one point they were like almost $2 a liter. It was like brutal. And
so just that conversion factor is there's almost 4 liters in a gallon. So it's roughly $8 a gallon for those who are familiar with the US. But yeah, I wanted to do that conversion for you. Yeah.
Sure, sir. Thank you. Yeah. So that happened. And then what it did was it just disrupted the budgeting of every single household here in Alberta. So because when the gas prices goes up, your logistics gets expensive, your food gets expensive, every single thing was expensive. So I was listening to a channel on radio was talking about the gas pricing in Alberta in the last 1 year went up by 120%. The grocery pricing went up to over 48%. So these two are one of the biggest expenses. And again, we live in this capitalist world where, savings, there's no name of saving. Everybody just most of the people, they live on their credit cards and all of that. So they plan their month in a way that, okay, I'll get this much money, I'll expend this much money. There's no concept of saving. So we started seeing like a crazy pattern in our clinic where we would get the assessments, but the people would like not complete the treatment plans. Like they would just come in and they know that, because we are very strict about the results. So within 2 or 3 sessions, they would feel better and then they would just drop off. So there was like a crazy drop off rate, and like we were just struggling to maintain that. So a lot of cancellation, a lot of no shows. At one point, it went up to like 20% cancellation no show rate. That was the first time that I noticed that we started losing money since we have opened the clinic. So our average revenues, we started seeing like a $10,000 loss in the revenue, $20,000. So in a quarter, I think the second quarter was the worst for us, where we saw almost, I think, $70,000 revenue loss. So that was like, and again, we kept thinking about what to do, because when people don't have money, what else can you do to get them to come to the clinic? Like, we had a conversation about it, me and you, at Denver. But one thing that we did was we basically started thinking about, like, people are still buying the businesses. So one of my friend, he works at a big furniture box store, and I was talking to him. He's like, man, we still have people, they come and buy the furniture. What the hell are you guys doing? Like, how do people buying the furniture when they don't have money to drive the car and run the household? Like, yeah, we have this system called buy now, pay later. What? Like, can we implement it in the clinic? So what we did was we contacted a few companies who would run that system, buy now, pay later. Like, hey, do you do this? And in the medical field, there are hardly a couple. So because Canada is a public healthcare system, so there's barely 1 or 2 companies. So we contacted them, and then so that's what we're doing now, and that's been working well. That we contacted a company, we're like, okay, now we have started selling packages, so at least the clinic would get the bulk of revenue. Like, sure. So we set up 2 systems. One was where the patient had to pay the interest rate. And again, it was learning for us. The patient would pay 7% interest and pay the fee back in 1 year time. Nobody liked it. Even the patient didn't love it. So then we changed that. We hired another company. And now we're working with them. So it's a 0% payment plan for the patients. So they can buy 10 session package, and a clinic pay, I think, 9.2% management fee of that value, which is still better than nothing. But at least if you can sell those packages in volume, it's still a beneficial service for us. So now patient pays 0% interest. They buy 10 visit package and they pay over the year, 1 year time to the company without any interest. Everybody is happy. We are getting our money. So that's one thing we changed.
That's great.
Yeah.
Love how you problem solve, man. Very well done.
Thanks.
Awesome. So I have rapid fire. I'm going to ask you a couple questions, random from a deck we have. So let's see what we have here.
Bad at it.
Oh, come on. Was there something that you really wanted bad when you were growing up, but you were always told no?
When I was growing up, I wanted to be a model. I wanted to do modeling, and because, for an average, middle class family, it's like you got to study, you got to get a job, you got to, do all of these things. So that was one thing I always got heard no for that.
Okay, fair enough. You're a role model now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Very good.
Thank you.
So if you had an extra hour in a day, what would you do with it?
Spend time with my son.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one thing. I'm sorry I'm taking your time, but just kind of why I'm saying that is because the first 2 years of my life, of my professional, to running the clinic, um, I used to leave home at 6 o'clock in the morning when my son was fast asleep. I used to get back home at 11 o'clock at night. He was sleeping. So the first 2 years, all credit to my wife. She raised him. I had no contribution at all. So now I just feel guilty about it, and I try and spend as much time as I can. Today he starts his ice skating classes. It's first day. I'm going to go leave at 5 o'clock, go with him, spend time. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Next grade hockey player. Don't you have quite a few?
Oh, yeah. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl.
Yeah, that's right. I'll give you a choice here. First question is, if you could have dinner with 3 people, dead or alive, who would you go with and where would you go? So that's question number 1. Or what's one piece of advice you would give to everyone? Your choice. You can answer either question.
I can both of them. I'll say actually both of them.
Okay, great. So
or
dinner,
one, yeah.
Dinner with 3 people, yes.
All right. So with my dad, for sure, is the one person I would love to go out on dinners. Second person would be you, and not just because we're talking right now. Because
man.
And I'll give you the real rationale behind it. And the third person would be, you introduced me to, you shared a video with me back in Denver about somebody, Monish Pabrai.
Oh, Monish.
Yeah.
Pretty smart dude, right?
Pretty smart dude. So I've been consistently following him in the sense I've been listening and watching and reading and a whole bunch of things and all of that. So I feel at least in this time and frame today, these 3 people, my dad, I personally feel like he's the most intelligent person I know in my life. Super genius guy. So every time you sit down with them, just the experience that they share with you, it's amazing. There's no substitute to that. With you, I've had lots of mentors. With you, one thing I've learned is, or one thing I like getting mentored by you is there is no filter. A lot of people, they always feel that, even with a lot of teachers, they always feel that, they restrict themselves from teaching everything that they have to other people out there, thinking that they can steal their mind and steal the stuff that they know and then run their own stuff. So that's one thing I've learned from you, and I always appreciate that. No matter what conversation we have, you're always a no filter man, and you try and just give whatever you have. So I always appreciate that. So that's the reason why I love spending time with you. Monish Pabrai. So I've been listening to his, just so people know that he's an investor. I think he has his own hedge fund and all. One thing when I listen to his podcast now for the years, I just, again, he's such an honest guy. He's again, whatever is in his mind, he would just say it out. You very rarely would see people so honest out in the public field. right? So I feel, and I can somehow relate with a lot of things that he talks about. So I feel like in today's time and frame, he'll be a pretty good person to have dinner with. I would love to go with Warren Buffett, but he stopped doing that. Yeah.
That's great. Just to, Monish Pabrai. I forget what's the name of the book?
Dando Investors.
Thank you. So Manish Pabrai is an investor. He was famous for buying dinner or lunch with Warren Buffett. I think he paid $600,000 with Guy Spear, if I remember right.
Guy Spears. Yeah.
Yep. And so he was one of the first winners of the auction of the lunch with Warren Buffett, and then became good friends with Charlie Munger as well, who is also of Berkshire Hathaway fame. So he runs. It's not I forget the exact way that but it is some sort of investment. It's called Pabrai Funds.
Pabrai Funds, yeah.
I looked at. I was curious. It's a $2.5 million minimum investment with him, and what they do is primarily value investing, but they do it around the world. So they look for heavily depressed markets of good businesses, and they invest. It's a very consolidated portfolio. There's no mutual funds or anything. And I believe their rule is based off of the original Berkshire investment philosophy, or Warren Buffett's first investment. And it's his investment company. And the way that they do it is 6% a year. There is no fee. Anything above and beyond 6%, it's either 20 or 25%. You're paying as a fee to Pabrai Funds. So it's
management. Yeah,
exactly. And there is a specific name for that, and it's escaping me right now. But awesome guy. Love your picks there. Although it made me feel funny that you mentioned me, but I appreciate it. Feelings mutual. We will be in Chicago here shortly, so hopefully I get to catch up with you there. Anything? The last piece was any advice? Yes. Let's get back to that. Any advice?
Yeah, so two pieces of advice. So one is, and again, these are just from the life learnings, right? That you grow as a professional and as a person. So one thing I would say is, a lot of times when it comes to the business, like, be ready to don't regret doing things. And whenever I talk to like friends and family, or even the gut clinicians and all of that, I always hear them saying that, okay, I made a bad investment, or I did this wrong back then, or I did this. So I personally feel like when we are going back in that regretting phase, like, okay, when I'm regretting my decision that I made 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 6 months ago, for me to sit down today in a different situation, in a scenario, and analyzing that is probably not the right thing to do. Whatever you did in the past, whether you were a clinician and you ran your practice for 20 years in a different way, if you're sitting in front of somebody, do not regret that. Okay, I did not run my practice in the right way. Sure, learn from it, but don't regret, because the decision that we made back in the days, or back in that time, was very apt, and you made that decision based on your best abilities, your best situation you were in. So that's one thing that I've learned over the years in the personal running, that I don't regret anything, that I don't want people to regret any decision that they have made in their lives. Learn from them for sure. Make sure, if you feel that they could be a wrong decision back then, but don't regret it. Regretting is the worst thing in the world. I that's what I feel like. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Deepak, thank you so much for your time here, and also your kind words. I do want to leave you with one thing. Don't regret those first 2 years with your son. You're making up for it. Go watch him skate his face off.
Yeah.
That'll be great.
Thank you.
And I'm sure
always a pleasure. Yeah, always a pleasure sitting with you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.
Remember to visit getbreakthrough.com to access our free resource library designed specifically for private practice growth. While you're there, make sure you register for a complimentary growth assessment to learn about potential opportunities for growth in your local market. Again, Thank you for tuning into the Grow Your Practice podcast and supporting our mission to help people in pain get back to normal naturally.